You're listening to the ASOTU CON Sessions by Effective live from ASOTU CON 2024.
My name is Joe Overby, and I am here on the ASOTU CON podcast stage in collaboration with Effect TV. And sitting across from me is Darrell Steed, who is the president of SmartWolf Consulting. Darrell, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. And you and I were talking a bit at lunch and talking about how the name SmartWolf came to be. Mm-hmm. What was the idea behind that?
So I was the senior trainer for Kelley Blue Book and Cat Schoffer, and I had been the used car director for quite some time before I made that move. And my boss called me one day and said, "Hey, what are you doing in these dealerships? Because everyone's calling saying that like you just fix things." And I said, "Well, I go in, I do," and they asked me if I can fix other things. And so he says, "You're like the wolf." So of course it was this big, huge joke of like Wolf of Wall Street. Like I go in and I'm like doing drugs with dealers or something. And it was from what I say the greatest movie is Pulp Fiction. Yeah. The character Winston Wolf is I'm the fixer. You call me in, if you give me a problem, I need 24 hours, I'm gonna get you a solution. And it kind of stuck. So when I left and created my own consulting for acquisition and used car operations I'm gonna do things the smartest way possible because I wanna work smart. And I'm going to use the nickname because now everybody knows it.
Yeah. We were, I think the two movies we're talking about here, two greatest directors, of all time probably, but the one movie is maybe the one, the Pulp Fiction is maybe the one you want to be associated with the wolf there. But
I'll go with the guy that fixes things other than the other wolf.
Yeah. Well, I want to see about, You've worked at both the dealership, mm-hmm. the corporate level, and now in the consulting business. So what are some specific used car lessons that you've taken from the dealership world, the corporate world, that you're now applying in the consulting world?
So the reason I wanted to become a consultant is when I was a used car director, not that used cars is easy, but when you have a vision and drive, you can make something successful because it's on your own back. When I went and worked for Kelley Blue Book, it was an eye-opening experience of just how little they give dealers to be successful. They give them just enough to essentially, if they don't have the right people in place, to fail. So when I wanted to become a consultant was, if there's all these tools out there, but you don't have the right people or you're not doing training or education, I could feel a void for people that are like, hey, we have these tools, but we're not getting the same results or effectiveness that they said we're supposed to get. As I could go in there and actually be that piece that isn't provided from most corporations because they just don't have the bandwidth. They don't have that one-on-one time that, as I call it, the Jerry Maguire effect, is actually care and take care of your people. And so that was what I wanted to be in that model was I'm going to be able to help with used car operations, fixed ops, acquisition. Any tool you get, I still go to all the classes, the webinars daily, reading books, so I can be an SME in that, but then I can actually create the care points and the actual implementation of its success in those things for the dealer.
Yeah. So one of the things that you offer is, helping dealers start that used car buying center. Mm-hmm. What advice would you have for dealers who are kind of starting from zero and looking to start a buying center?
So first thing I would say is, if you want to do a buying center, this has to be as important as your sales department. If you're going to be the type of dealer that says, well, we want to try it, lose my number. And this is why is if you're just trying something, as the greatest philosopher in the world, Yoda said, right? Okay, there's no try, there's do and do not. Is you have to make it the same focus as selling cars, the same focus as servicing cars, because buying cars, auction, private party, is the hardest job in the dealership environment. And so you have to make a commitment to building that business model.
Yeah. Is that, do you find that dealers are putting more emphasis on buying centers now, especially because used car supply has shrunk the past couple of years?
I think most dealers want to figure out how to have a buying center, but when you have conversations of the right people, the infrastructure, the investment, then most of them are immediately like rethinking it because then it's like, oh, it's the reality check of you can go to the auction and overpay for cars and auction fees. No one gets that second level of conversation of if you spent less money but could do it in-house and have that control, is they don't realize that it is an investment. It's not going to magically happen in 30 days. It's going to take time to build that and be part of a business model.
Do you think it needs to be like a separate physical center?
No, I think it could be within store, but it needs to be treated as a completely separate model.
Gotcha.
Because you're creating an experience, a brand. And if you think of it like, so in the West Coast, there's a jewelry store called Devon's, and their whole ad is, we don't pay commissions. And so it eases that tension of there's no commission, so there's not a good example in the media of a dealership. So if you watch movies and everything else, car dealers, right? It's like, oh my gosh, it's a bad experience. It's this and that because every movie has painted the dealership experience as that type of situation. The buying center, you want to separate that. And we're just here to get you the most money for your car, make it easy, and then you can go buy whatever you want. So CarMax did that a little bit with the Weeby Sadibo. And now dealerships have the opportunity to actually take marketplace back from CarMax, but it's, do you want to? Because that's all it is just the decision of wanting to. Because CarMax doesn't do anything that a dealership can't do. They just made the choice to do it.
Do you think it's still a case where the John Q public doesn't know that you can sell your own personal car to a dealership without buying a new one?
That's part of the branding strategy. I'm sure they know because every dealership I see has a banner on their building that says we buy cars. But that's when I kind of focus on, that's a secondary focus. No one comes to your store just to sell a car.
Right.
So do you have people calling people, or do you have a branding strategy? Do you have social media? The one client that I'm working with right now, just building that for them, they were one of the first that actually said, we want to do it all. So they have social media accounts. We just had signage put in the store, like an enterprise sublet. So you walk in and it looks like an enterprise rental desk would be there. It's a branded, bannered buying center. And so when you come in, you're like, turn right and look for the big green sign, and this is where you get the most money. It's a completely, and so if salespeople know that, they're like, oh, that's how you get the most money for your vehicle. And they direct them there. So it's a marriage of the dealership and buying aspect.
So, the goal is to help consumers, as you say, get the most money for their vehicle, but profits also made at acquisition. So how can a dealer, make built-in profit, but also, give consumers a good value? What are some steps they can take to do that?
Well, the first step, which then ties into, and we'll talk about this later on the panel, is your acquisition strategy should be the same as your trade-in appraisals and everything. You should have the same feel and rhythm so that they aren't getting anything different. But how you have that strategy, where do you want your profit? There's profit in fixed ops, there's profit in back end, there's profit in front end. You're not going to make it in the same place every time, but the more opportunities you have to gain customers is how the profit's going to be made. And so I sit down with dealers and say, where do you want to put it? How do you want to grow? Because every store is different. The store that says they want to buy 200 cars, and much like one of the speakers said, if I bought 200 cars a day and put it in your service department, I would implode the service department. You have to have that conversation of what can you do? How successful can you be? And then how do you want it to grow? And you figure out where the profit's going to come. And then you just know, now you can start forecasting. So it is a growth model based on your bandwidth, people, and then operational stuff.
So I imagine it's different for every dealer group or individual dealer you work with, but what are some, when you go, if you flew out here from Maryland to Tennessee or somewhere to work with a dealer and setting up a buying center, what are some first steps that you kind of work with them through? What's the day-to-day process for starting out?
So the first one is we have the conversation, how many cars do you want to buy a year from now? Not today, because if you get 2 or 3 or 4, great, but what does it look like once it's built, once we know what's going on? And then now let's work it backwards. The second is, let's get the right people. So I'm a firm believer in slow to hire, fast to fire, but you need to get the right people because these aren't going to be sales guys most of the time. These need to be people that, collection reps, BDC people, that you're going to make a lot of calls, and you have to have can-do attitude because it looks something like this: 100 calls, texts a day, hearing no, and you going, on to the next one, because you're telling someone a value or you're setting up an appointment and they want more. Well, you're not going to hear a lot of yeses unless, of course, in COVID, and then the first number you threw at them was like, yeah, that sounds fantastic. So you have to get the people that understand you're building a pipeline, they can overcome adversity, and then once it gets going, like the challenge of doing something people can't.
Well, last question before I let you go here is a follow-up to what you just said. What are some resources for dealers to go find, those people to work at a buy center? Because it sounds like it's different than, just the finding people to be a salesperson.
So I use Indeed. We'll use Craigslist. We put out ads, but it's in what you say. So words matter is what are you looking for? And then just like we talked about being a priority for sales and service, does your pay plan dictate the level of or professional experience that you want? So if you're trying to get someone, I'm going to pay a minimum wage and bonus, okay, put the ad out for what you want, not for what what pencils. Because you're building a business, which means you're going to need to get the right talent in place.
Good deal. Well, Darrell, thank you so much for joining us here, and let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this ASOTU Con Session by Effective. If you want more content like this, you can check out our other podcasts. We have a daily show called The Automotive Troublemaker, Monday through Friday. Here on podcast, also live streamed on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook. We also have a long-form podcast called Auto Collabs. And if you just want to go a little deeper into this community, you should sign up for our regular email. We put our heart and soul into it. You can get it for free by going to asotu.com. We'll see you next time.